Welcome back, U.S. history students, to Mr. King's series of lectures on the progressive movement. We're really making good headway, so I hope you guys are all able to log on, watch these videos, and take some good notes. And again, the good notes are really kind of important because it's not enough just to get down a couple of names, a couple of questions, but we really want the information so that we can use that information in class, discuss the importance and the different aspects of progressive movements. And it's pretty impressive because we go from religion to economics to gender issues to societal issues. So the progressive period really is a broad movement, and it really does set up later periods in U.S. history that we're going to encounter throughout the year. So let's get back to the progressive movement. This is the third of 4 lectures, so there'll be one more following this. And today we're going to look at 2 figures primarily. Robert La Follette, the governor of Wisconsin, known as a progressive governor. And then we're going to turn our attention to the national level. So we're going to see President Theodore Roosevelt, who many historians have called the first modern president. He was a progressive president, and there's a lot of issues and possible debates surrounding that. But first we want to just learn some basic background before we do anything else. And let me just repeat here on this slide, we see that there were 2 goals, really, at least politically speaking, for the progressives. They wanted a more efficient government. They didn't want government dominated by political machines, politicians handing out jobs in returns for votes, either at the city or state levels. They wanted a more efficient government with fewer government workers, which sounds kind of similar to some of the things we're hearing today. They also wanted a government that was more responsive to the needs of people. And again, if you go back to the first lecture and even the second lecture, I'll say it again, it's worth repeating that the progressives wanted to put the people back into the equation, back into the picture. So let's move on and take a look at first fighting Robert La Follette, governor of Wisconsin. You can see a picture of him there under the progressive banner. And as a governor, he really did a lot of interesting things. 1903, in Wisconsin, they created the direct primary. And that was the method that political parties used to select candidates for state elected offices and then later national elected offices. And you might be wondering, well, okay, a direct primary. Well, voters got to select the candidates, not the actual political party machines. And that's how, up until the 1900s, it really kind of worked that way. A lot of times, men, really very few women were involved in politics at any level. Men would sit around in the political machines and suggest this candidate or that candidate run for House of Representatives, for a Senate seat, either at the state government level or the national government level. And they even selected presidential candidates in this fashion. And this really cut out the people. So the direct primary is the people choosing candidates to run for elected office. And the idea is that this would return power to the people. The second thing you see up there is the public initiative. And this really is interesting. It allowed citizens themselves to introduce bills or ideas into the state legislature at this point. And the state legislature would then have to take up citizens' ideas for new laws. A bill is the same thing as a law. So really now, you didn't have to be an elected official to suggest or propose new laws, the public initiative. And again, you can see the people front and center being able to participate in a way that they had not been able to do before. Point number 3 is the popular referendum. This allowed the people to review current laws, and again, we're talking at the state level. There were several other states that followed the lead of Wisconsin, California being one of them. And popular referendum said, hey, people, you don't like a certain law? Well, you can vote on it, and if enough people voted in favor of it, then the law would be taken off the books. This is really, again, the people are able to become active even though they're not elected officials. And this is a really powerful thing. And again, it really doesn't exist in a lot of states today. I don't know the exact number. That would be an interesting little research project if we have time. The fourth thing up there is public recall, and this also allows people to remove elected officials. from office before that person's term ended. And this really allowed the people to essentially say, look, we're going to fire you, elected official, because you are not doing your job. You're incompetent or you're corrupt. This does still exist in Wisconsin. In fact, in 2012, 1 year ago, the people of Wisconsin had a recall vote with Governor Scott Walker, a Republican who had angered a lot of people in Wisconsin over issues of jobs and pay and unions, and they recalled him, or they tried to recall him. The people, in fact, voted to keep Governor Walker in his position. But back in the early 2000s, there was a famous recall vote in California where the governor at that time, Jerry Brown, who actually is the governor today, so Jerry Brown came back, but Governor Brown was recalled from office, which led to the election of that great Hollywood muscle-bound star, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who served 2 terms as California's governor. So those are really kind of interesting developments that took place in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin has sort of been called by some the laboratory of progressive reforms, and La Follette was very active as a governor in promoting these reforms. We're going to jump now to La Follette in national politics. And it deals with the election of senators to the U.S. Senate in Washington. And from 1789 to 1912, U.S. senators were not elected by the people, a fact that many people don't know or forget. These senators then were elected by state lawmakers, not the public, and therefore I have equals corruption. So state lawmakers make selections. Each state has 2 senators. They made the selection. The people did not have a voice, and there was lots of corruption. And senators were typically wealthy men. Someone by the name of David Graham Phillips referred to the Senate as the Millionaires Club, or maybe it was somebody else, but David Graham Phillips wrote about this. He's one of the characters in our upcoming interview sessions. And therefore, the senators didn't really represent the people. They represented the interests of wealthy people, and they lived kind of detached from the daily lives of most American citizens. So La Follette and others led the charge to reform the election of senators, and they succeeded in getting a bill through Congress to amend the Constitution, and then enough states actually ratified or passed it in 1913. So with the 17th Amendment, we now have the direct election of U.S. senators. So that's kind of an exciting development. So La Follette also involved himself at the national political level. We're now going to look at another interesting issue. We've already talked about females, and this time we're going to talk more about female suffrage. Now, suffrage is a fancy word. It simply means to vote. And you can see here in this photo, I think it really captures the essence. And it says, to fight, to struggle, to right the wrong. And I think that's really a very neat, succinct way of capturing the idea of the progressive movement, to fight, to struggle, to right the wrong. And this was the females' attempts, middle-class, well-educated females began to really resent the fact that they were excluded from participation in the American democratic political system and process. So let's just do a quick history review. In 1848, there was something known as the Seneca Falls Convention. A group of women got together to argue for women's rights, particularly the right to vote. They were largely unsuccessful. Not until the 1890s, and with the work and help of the National American Women Suffrage Association, very long title, did women win the right to vote in local and state elections, not national elections. That is, they could not vote for president, for example. And this occurred in 19 states. Many of those states were west of the Mississippi. So this is an interesting phenomenon geographically speaking. The West allows women more rights and the ability to participate. Eastern states do not. But by 1920, the work of the National American Women Suffrage Association succeeded in amending the Constitution yet again. So the progressive period sees the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 that gave women the right to vote in all elections. And this again is a major step forward, or what we would call progress, which is the whole idea of this time period. So moving on. We're going to now focus on a president, and the next several slides are going to be about President Theodore Roosevelt. In fact, everything I say is going to be about President Theodore Roosevelt, who served from 1901 to 1909, right at the beginning of the 20th century. And President Roosevelt is really a colorful character, a vibrant guy, dynamic, active. He was a boxer in his youth, was Harvard educated, went out west and lived, tried to ranch, kind of failed at that. Maybe it wasn't his fault. Mother Nature didn't help necessarily, but he believed in the active, strenuous life. He also worked into various government posts after his failed ranching career. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time of the Spanish-American War. In fact, helped to promote the war cause in the United States. And he then was the governor, and I guess I forgot that in this thing, but he was the governor of New York for one term, and very active in New York in promoting progressive causes and reforms at the state level, just like La Follette in Wisconsin. And then he gets himself elected vice president in 1900, serving under William McKinley. Now, when William McKinley had been president from 1896 to 1900, he won re-election in 1900, but he was shot in 1901 by a deranged anarchist, Leon Czolgosz. So Roosevelt becomes president quite by accident, and he didn't expect to be president, but he finds himself in the role of president. He promises the American people and his own Republican Party that he's going to continue to rule and govern as William McKinley did. William McKinley was very conservative, or fairly conservative, practiced the gold standard, promoted corporations, and that type of thing. Roosevelt, however, turned out to be quite a different animal in office. And he really is called the first modern president because he was energetic. He was the center of attention. He sought attention. He wanted the light to shine on him. He also claimed to be the steward, that is, the protector of the public good. He knew better, he was better educated, and he was going to do all he could to protect the people. Again, think progressive and people. He also was somewhat of a preacher. He loved to give speeches, and he used the White House. In fact, he calls the presidential residence the White House really for the first time. Kind of an interesting tidbit. And he used the White House as a bully pulpit, that is, giving loud, angry speeches. But he was also a charming and magnetic person who really enjoyed widespread support. So let's see what Roosevelt actually did. The list of achievements is long. The Northern Securities case in 1902, Roosevelt began to believe that the big trusts, and in this case the Railroad Trust, were not working in the best interests of the people, and people demanded fair transportation prices and costs from the railroads. And back in 1890, John Sherman, a senator, and the government and the president passed what was known as the Antitrust Act of 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act, but it was largely unused. Presidents really didn't use the power of their office to attack corporations. They used the Antitrust Act to attack labor unions. In 1902, there was a coal strike, and Roosevelt got involved personally, inviting members of both sides of the dispute, the owners of the mines and the miners, to the White House, and he mediated, that is, he played umpire to work out a deal that was equal to both sides, like the sides of a square. So this has been called by historians, and Roosevelt really himself, the square deal, inaugurating a number of deals that we're going to see in the 20th century, from the New Deal, the Fair Deal later on. And Roosevelt played both sides. He didn't give the workers everything they wanted, but he didn't give the mine owners everything he wanted. And he really intervened in the strike because people faced the prospect of no coal, no heat, and a very cold winter in 1902. And so Roosevelt used the office of presidency to resolve the dispute. We look at the other things. All right, back after a brief interruption to finish up President Roosevelt, the progressive president. 1903, the Elkins Act outlawed special rates that railroad companies were routinely providing to favored customers, thereby creating unfair advantages, and this was a limitation of fairness and also liberty. In 1906, Roosevelt asked Congress to pass the Hepburn Act, which it did, and he signed, that actually gave the federal government the power to regulate railroad rates and set maximum rates that could be charged. It also allowed the government to inspect the actual financial records and books of the rail companies. Really an interesting development at that time, unheard of. Roosevelt created the Department of Commerce to regulate trade, and also the Bureau of Corporations to keep tabs on the large corporations. And remember that there had been a flurry that is a lot of mergers in the 1890s. So Roosevelt is going to be very active in trying to rein in the power of the corporations. And then we turn to the Newlands Reclamation Act of 1902, the creation of public parks, national forests. Environmental concerns are quite important to President Roosevelt, and he felt that it was time that the United States begin to take care of its environment. So that's that. We'll end here. See you soon.